night 58 of History Bedtime Stories, in bed, in our pajamas. Tonight, let's talk about how the Detroit Pistons came to be the Detroit Pistons. For those of you who aren't sports fans, like me, the Detroit Pistons are our basketball team. And it all starts not anywhere near Detroit. It starts in Fort Wayne, Indiana, when a man named Fred Zollner, who had made his money along with his sister, Janet Zollner, owning a foundry that produced pistons for the automobile companies, purchased and really franchised a 1937 basketball team called the Fort Wayne Pistons. In fact, the Fort Wayne Pistons had for their logo this little guy. He is a robot with a big Z on his chest for Zollner, and if you look closely, he's made out of pistons. That makes a lot of sense because he was owned by this guy who produced pistons. The team remains in Fort Wayne, Indiana until 1957. 8 years after Mr. Pro Basketball himself, Fred Zollner, helps broker the deal to form the National Basketball Association. He realizes that Fort Wayne is just too small of a market, and by moving the team up to Detroit, he can make a lot more money. So they move up to Detroit, and from 1957 to 1961, they play at Olympia. From Olympia, they go to Cobo. From Cobo in 1978, they go to the Pontiac Silverdome, and basketball in Detroit in the 1970s was terrible. They were very, very bad. Attendance was dropping. People weren't coming. There were all of these problems, and then in 1981, under new ownership, Isaiah Thomas is drafted. Now that new ownership took charge of the team in 1974. It was William Davidson who purchased the team for $6 million, what was considered a bargain basement, bottom of the barrel, fire sale kind of price. Davidson makes decisions over the next decade and a half that will lead to one of the most celebrated, hated, talked about groups of players in all sports history. It starts with Isaiah Thomas's draft in 81, then the hiring of Chuck Daly as the head coach in 1983, followed by the trading, drafting, and sort of gathering of a group of players, including Joe Dumars, Bill Laimbeer, Rick Monohorn, Dennis Rodman. These guys form the Bad Boys. Now, this is a set of logos of the history of the Pistons, from Fort Wayne to Detroit. But if you were a kid in the 1980s, if you were a basketball fan in the early 1990s, you know there is one logo that is left off of that list because it is not official, but it is the one we know instinctively is part of the Pistons. The Bad Boys. And if you didn't have this shirt growing up in Detroit, you really missed out. As the Bad Boys, the Detroit Pistons make 9 consecutive years of playoffs and win the championship back-to-back in 89 and 90. In 2011, the team is sold. There is one more championship in there in 2004, and that's the Chauncey Billups, Ben Wallace, Rasheed Wallace team. But the team is sold in 2011, having had 2 victories, 2 championships in Indiana, 3 championships as the Detroit Pistons. It is sold to Tom Gores. Gores is able to buy the team for $325 million. Again, thought to be really cheap, like a bargain basement price for a pro sports team. But it's because from the 2004 championship all the way to the purchase in 2011, the Pistons hadn't done a whole lot. And buying a team that's not performing well, you're going to get it cheaper than an all-star team. In 2011, when Gores takes over, there's already talk about moving the team back into Detroit proper, back into the city and out of the suburbs where they had been playing at the Auburn Hills Palace. I should have said that as the Palace of Auburn Hills. The team eventually is able to move back into the city through a deal with the Ilitch family and Olympia Entertainment. They, since 2017, have played at Little Caesars Arena on Woodward Avenue here in the heart of Detroit. And of course, still called the Pistons, all the way back to a foundry-owning pair of siblings in Fort Wayne, Indiana. If you've been enjoying History Bedtime Stories, do us a favor and like and share this video. And if you post your very favorite Pistons player of any era down in the comments below, we'll enter you into a raffle next week to win a big old set of City of Detroit stickers. Wash your hands. See you tomorrow night.